Hey guys, I'm not used to making videos, so bear with me. I made this video, or I wanted to make this video because I'd like to bring awareness to a rare disease that I have. It kind of shocked me when I got diagnosed with it last year, and I wanted to shine some light. And I also wanted to help others who could either currently be dealing with something similar or may have it and not know it. It's rare, but you never know. I feel like this could help someone. So here is my story. This was in May of last year, which was May 2020. And I was in my room and I laid my arm down on something that had dust on it. And I'm allergic to dust, so usually I'll get itchy, which I did, but then I looked down at my arm and it had hives. And I very rarely get hives. Usually if I get hives, it'll be like one tiny one, and usually it's on my face. But it was on my arms, and so I'm like, okay. And it was quite a bit of them. And so I didn't think anything of it. I took some Zyrtec, kept it moving. And then a few days go by and I still had the hives. And I'm like, okay. Then a week went by, still had the hives. I'm like, okay, I need to go to my allergist and see what's going on. So I went to my allergist, and he thought that I had chronic hives, which is why he prescribed me with a medication. I believe it was called Xolair, and it's a shot that you can get for chronic hives, and you get it, I believe, once a month. And so he was trying to get me to start taking that because he believed that that was the issue. But no, that wasn't the issue. From there, I began to have a lot of back-to-back symptoms. It was changing like every few days or every week. And so from there, I ended up going to the hospital because I realized it was outside of his scope. So I went to a local hospital and I told them that I had the hives. But at this point, I had the hives and I had symptoms of strep throat. It was extremely hard to swallow. And not only that, but it was very painful to swallow. I have never felt that feeling in my life where I go to swallow and it hurts so bad. And I'm like, I wasn't sure if the hives and the strep throat or strep throat symptoms were connected somehow, but I just found it very strange that I had them back to back and the hives still hadn't went away. But I went to the emergency room and they were no help. They tested me for strep throat. They said, oh, you don't have strep throat, but we'll give you some pain meds for pain. So I took the pain meds. They didn't help. It was just like I might as well have been taking pixie sticks or something. It wasn't doing anything. So then once I saw that that wasn't helping, I just hoped that it would go away. I'm like, hopefully this goes away and it's over. But no. So then I woke up one morning. I guess it was like in the middle of the night. And I went to go to the bathroom. And then I came back and tried to fall back asleep. And then my leg started hurting so bad. I tried to turn like on the leg, and it was the most excruciating pain I have ever felt in my leg in my life. And I couldn't move it. Even if I tried, like at that point when I tried to move it even a little bit, it hurt so bad. So I was so confused. I'm like, okay, I not only have hives, but I also can't swallow, and my leg literally will not allow me to move it because it's in so much pain. So then I went to the emergency room again, and after I went the second time at this point, to the same local hospital, they were like, we don't know what's going on. We can give you some payments, a COVID test, but at this point, we don't really know what to tell you. So I got the COVID test. It was negative. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, I know I'm not crazy. Something is going on with my body. So then it was like late at night, and I was trying to sleep, and I all of a sudden couldn't breathe. And I was starting to have asthmatic issues, which I have struggled with asthma in the past. It was mostly when I was younger, but I kind of grew out of it. It hasn't been an issue in adulthood. So I all of a sudden had this labored breathing, and I wasn't sure like where it was coming from. I hadn't been doing any heavy lifting or anything. I was just laying down. So out of nowhere, I get this labored breathing. And so at this point, like adding up all the different symptoms, I had hives all over my body, and it was still hard to swallow, even though it had gotten a little bit better as far as not hurting to swallow, but it still wasn't comfortable. And then I didn't have the pain in my leg anymore, but it was a lot more difficult to walk. So I was a lot more weak at this point. But then on top of that, I was having problems breathing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Like, what the heck is going on? And for whatever reason, everybody thought I had COVID. It was not COVID. So from there, I went to the ER for the third time, but this time I went to a different hospital. And the hospital, they tried to help as best they could, but the doctors didn't really find anything. So I stayed there for a few hours, and then they allowed me to leave, and they just gave me an inhaler. And I forgot exactly what they told me, but they just said, we don't think it's XYZ, just use your inhaler if you need it, and we're not sure about the rest of it. So then the following day, I was having chest pains, and I was still having the other symptoms. And at this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I was still having all the other issues as before. But then on top of that, at this point, it was extremely hard for me to walk, and it was hard for me to speak as well. It was hurting. It hurt to talk in my chest. So I'm like, okay, I know I just went to the ER yesterday, but I'm going to go back tomorrow because they got to get to the bottom of this. This is an issue. So I went back, and they said, you were here yesterday. And I said, yes. And so that's when they started taking it a lot more seriously. Of course, they took it serious the first time. And the second time, they were like, okay, you were just here yesterday and you're back today. We have to get to the bottom of this because it's something. So they ended up keeping me overnight. Ultimately, I ended up staying there for about 3 weeks while they tried to figure out what was going on. When I first got there, they definitely were suspecting that I had COVID. So they put me on the COVID floor, and I was given all these different tests. They were testing me for COVID, giving me the antibody test, and it was extremely difficult because at the time, I mean, COVID is still scary, but it was right in the heart of COVID at that point. 'Cause at this point, it's, I would say early June of 2020. And so my family was scared, I was scared, and they couldn't even come visit me because I was suspected to have COVID and I was on the COVID floor. And then on top of that, I couldn't call them because I couldn't talk. And at this point, I couldn't walk either. It was just all bad. Finally, they ruled out that I had COVID. They said, you do not have COVID. So after I was taken off of the COVID floor, I was brought to the surgical floor. And that is where I worked with a lot of different specialists. That includes the hematology team, rheumatology team, immunology, cardiology, infectious disease specialist, etc. While working with them, it was extremely difficult because I couldn't speak. And so when I was communicating with them, they were asking me a lot of different questions. And because I couldn't speak, I had to write on a napkin to communicate with them. And that was like literally, it's just so stressful to even think about. So from working with those different specialists, they were trying to narrow it down with whatever was going on with me, what team that fell under. So they realized that it actually fell on the rheumatology team. They came to this conclusion because they looked at my eosinophil levels and they realized that they were extremely high. So eosinophils basically are your disease-fighting white blood cells. Typically, the average person, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the average person has about like 300 to 400. I had 8,000. So that was a huge red flag to them that something was wrong. At that point, I'd already had a heart biopsy, and thankfully that didn't show any signs of any issues, so it wasn't a heart issue. And from there, I ended up having a bone marrow biopsy as well because they wanted to rule out cancer, because some of my symptoms did kind of fall in that spectrum. So they want to rule it out, and thankfully we did. And the final diagnosis was something called EGPA, which basically is a rare type of vasculitis. Vasculitis is inflammation of your blood vessels. And EGPA, which stands for Eosinophilic Granulomatosis with Polyangiitis, that is the autoimmune disease that I have currently. It's basically when your disease-fighting white blood cells, instead of protecting or instead of fighting the harmful bacteria or disease that enters your body, it attacks healthy parts of your body, like your organs, different tissues, things of that nature. And so that's basically what it was doing when I was having all of those symptoms early on. It was attacking healthy parts of my body, and that's why I was going through so many different things. It was because that was what was happening. I tell this story to bring awareness to this issue. I really don't want anyone to go through what I went through. I'm hoping that this will help bring awareness to that disease, and that this video can somehow bring people to a quicker, or others to a quicker diagnosis of this issue.